Greetings, Internet. Guess who's back? That's right, the Mega Cat is back. And I am, in fact, reviewing the latest Pain Train video game from the beloved From Software. In collaboration with Japan Studios, this is my review of Bloodborne. Prepare to die. A lot. The pain is coming. Quick note, in preparation for this review, I did play Dark Souls 2, and saw them both, so I understand how they work. So, you'll at least understand where I'm coming from when I talk about Bloodborne. Now, for those of you not familiar, what is Bloodborne? Bloodborne is the latest game from Software, makers of Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and not Dark Souls 2, that was some other chumps. And it shows, people. From Software has made a series of games popular for its crushing difficulty and ultra-rewarding boss battles. In a sense, imagine Shadow of the Colossus if there was actual monsters all over the world, rather just, one or two at a time. Now, as you can see, you play as a random human in a plague-ridden Victorian city, fighting giant monsters and demons and all kinds of other unpleasantness. As you go through the game, you slaughter your enemies, take their possessions, and gain blood echoes as rewards for defeating your opponents. You also rip their innards out like a boss, and more or less just try to survive in a world that pretty much wants you dead at every corner. And I'm not joking, everything in this world is pretty much hostile. There are one or two NPCs who are not inherently hostile, and don't become hostile unless you attack them. It doesn't change the fact that just about everybody else wants you dead. And we're not just talking the people. Oh no. We're talking everything. Beasts, dogs, birds, monsters, demons, and Cthulhu-esque giant whatever they are. I don't even know how to describe those things. We'll get to that. But basically, Bloodborne is a game in which you are one man against an entire world that wants you dead. And for some reason, they just can't kill you, but they sure keep trying. Now, for those familiar with the Dark Souls series, this may seem fairly familiar, and that's because, yes, this is by the same people who made Dark Souls, who made Demon Souls, not quite from the people who made Dark Souls 2, I don't think, because that game feels a lot different than the others. As you can see, this is not a pretty place either. This world has, well, the city has definitely seen better days. And you are not going to have a fun time trying to survive in it. But your enemies will fall with enough time and patience, and you can and will use their blood to power your strength. Now, that being said, we'll get to all that in the gameplay. But as I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, what's the story of this and how does it relate to the other games in the From Software menagerie, such as Dark Souls, Demon Souls, and so forth? Well, we'll get to that. But first, we do need to talk about the story in a general sense, and we'll be doing that in just a moment. But the core of the game is all about survival in the worst of circumstances, which relates very much to the way the Dark Souls series worked. Now, moving on to story. Bloodborne's story is very deep, but most of it is actually well hidden. It's not on its surface or given to you directly. It's very, very well crafted and designed in such a way that you're sort of finding it bit by bit as you go through the world. Everything from the items you find to the places you go to hold tiny pieces of a greater story. But there's also another mechanic that reveals the story as well, and I feel I cannot really talk about that without discussing some of the gameplay mechanics. So we'll do that both here and later. Now, that mechanic is known as insight. When you first start the game, you find yourself in a world populated by mostly people, some monsters, but in general just crazy people who've had a bad day. However, the farther you get into the game, the more of an object called insight you get. You get them by finding the boss monsters and defeating them, or by finding certain items that, when used, grant you insight instantaneously. Now, insight has two functions. It serves as a currency of sorts, but there's also another part to it. It actually serves in a major way as part of the game's story function. As you gain more insight, you begin to see a bigger truth in this world. You begin to see more of the world's hidden secrets all around you. And that is why I say it's both game mechanic and story mechanic. Acquiring insight is the only way to see the truth. And acquiring a certain amount of insight lets you see more than you would normally do. But it comes with a cost. When you acquire insight, the world becomes more dangerous. You begin to see more threats. You begin to see more demons, more enemies, and the enemies you fight become stronger, more deadly. The game becomes a brutal, almost unapologetic, masochistic pain train. And while this is undoubtedly going to be a bit of a stumbling block for some people, the story drives you forward so well that even at that risk, you want to know more. You want to know the truth. The monsters in this game are varied and many, and the farther you get and the more insight you acquire, the more of them you see. There's in fact monsters that are only visible when certain amounts of insight have been acquired. And this includes certain background elements too within the city. So the more insight you get, the more of the truth you find. The X-Files, the truth is out there. Only in this case, the truth is not only out there, it's trying to murder you constantly. Anyway, the story is not something I will spoil, but I will say that the farther you get into it, the more deep and impressive it becomes, and you will have a lot of fun and a lot of frustration finding the truth. Anyway, that being said, I won't spoil any of the big surprises that I found or any of the truths that I've unlocked, but I will say that I've had an immensely entertaining time doing it. And even though it is frustrating and there are times when I got a little bit angry, the game's core mechanics were entertaining enough that I didn't mind. Speaking of which, gameplay. When you break down the gameplay in Bloodborne, fans of the Soul series will feel a little bit nostalgic. It does bear a lot of similarity. Now, aside from the normal monsters you saw me fight, the game's biggest mechanics are its boss battles, as they incorporate all the skills you'll learn, from item usage, riposting your enemies, and use of your various weapon abilities. You're going to find that the more powerful you are, the more you have to practice to be able to win, because the enemies do not sit on their laurels. As you grow in strength, so will they. Now you'll notice I have to fight up close, and I have to dodge quite a bit. These are two core mechanics, and among the things you'll find is against the boss monsters, such as the Cleric Beast that you see in the upper right corner, or the Bloodstarved Beast that I'm fighting at the moment. Being able to dodge and position yourself is absolutely critical, as is the riposte move I just pulled off. When you use your firearm in your left hand at certain predictable points, you can actually stun your enemy and get a super damaging visceral attack from it. Some enemies have more than one way to activate this, others only one. And every enemy has unique traits or dangers that you have to learn. For example, the Bloodstarved Beast, which you see me fighting now, requires you to literally manage both damage and poison as factors throughout the battle. And as he takes damage, poison becomes more of a problem, because he begins to shed more poison the whole time. And he's just one of the bosses. And he's not even a required boss at that. But to get certain levels and unlock certain things, you must kill this beast. Now the game also allows you a wide variety of weapons, 12 so far that I know of, plus several different firearms and several additional special weapons. The weapon I'm using, the Saw Cleaver, is the basic weapon and pretty much the iconic weapon of the game. The Blunderbuss, my sidearm, is a good solid all-round shotgun, great for riposting, but not good for distance. The dodge mechanic, which you see me implementing, requires you to dodge fast and in the right direction, as the game's hit detection will still count it if it gets swept across you, even while dodging. This is something I do have a bit of an issue with, because I feel the dodge move isn't as effective as it ought to be. I also feel that one of the bigger problems with the game is that its menus and stat systems don't really explain things as well as they should. That being said, you will die in this game, and you better get used to it. If you're not comfortable with losing your lives, you may as well just walk away. This game is going to make you get killed a lot. That being said, it's such a triumphant feeling when you actually win that I can't begin to describe how that felt. For every time I saw this screen, when I saw prey slaughtered, I cheered. Anyway, moving on to the technical aspects. Bloodborne's technical aspects are amazing. I wish this was on PC, for God's sakes. But at current, it's a PS4 exclusive, and it makes great use of the system's power. The architecture is beautifully designed, the monsters are very detailed and intricate, and have very good animation. And the game has no loading issues. Well, no, let me rephrase that. The game has severe load times, but there is absolutely no lag. No frame rate issues that I've encountered in my playthrough, and very few issues with clipping or jamming within the environment. There are issues that do occur, and they can happen, but they're very rare overall. The game's also undeniably drenched in blood and color. Red is the predominant one here, but orange, even blue, and a lot of dark grays, metals, and browns permeate the city itself. The sky is constantly changing. The more insight you gain, the more things change in the background. The game also has a definitively gothic look, set against the themes of plague in the Victorian era. This is actually intentional and creates a great sense of dread and fear, because as you play, you begin to feel the dread and fear that people of that era might have. An unknown plague ripping through a city, grotesque monsters transformed by it, and horrible demons hiding in the background. There's nothing quite like this game's unusual aesthetic, and compared to the Dark Souls aesthetic, I feel this is a much better use of it. A good example of this is the fact that the Victorian styling allows it to have a variety of environments, from Central Yarnum, which is much more residential, and has big sewers, lots of apartment complexes, giant bridges, and all kinds of other stuff. There's the Cathedral Ward, which is very church-like and gothic. And then there's places like Old Yarnum, which is on constant, pretty much fire, burning all the time, shrouded in smoke and haze, and a very much unpleasant place, yet beautifully textured. I don't think that it's wrong to say that this game may have some of the most detailed and comprehensive environments you've ever seen, but the game's overall style is excellent. And I think there's a lot to be said for that particular item. Its music and audio is top-notch, but really not the highlight. They fit the scenario, and the game has some great sound effects. But that's a discussion that you can have among yourselves. However, it is now time for my verdict. Now, before I give my verdict, I want to preface a few things. One, I really think that this game could have done with a bit more music. However, the boss battle music is excellent. And I feel that trying to give a overview of it is doing it an injustice. Go listen to it yourself. Also, I want to give credit to whoever did the trailer for this game, specifically the Cut You Down trailer. You have proven that trailers can make me buy a game. Thank you. Now you've broken my faith in the media. Who am I kidding? I'm joking. But the truth is that was an excellent trailer and really got me interested in the game. And I think that the game's use of the appropriate music and stunning visuals really did it a service. Now, overall, I feel the game has a lot of strong points, and I feel that there are good things aplenty to be crowed about with this game. On the other hand, I think its weakest points are some of its game mechanic, and I will get into that in detail in a moment. The thing is, I have to put this out there. I have played Demon, Dark, and Dark Souls 2s. So, I played all the previous games, and I saw an immediate flaw in the game's mechanics in the older games. Notably that the game's focus on shielding and heavy armor was not really applied correctly. Nor was it really as balanced in terms of combat as it should have been. Now, this game has fixed that problem immensely by focusing more on high speed, close combat, and the transforming weapons that you see here. Now, there are still some problems with it. The dodge mechanic is a little bit staticky. I don't like the fact that it doesn't move you as much as it should, but that's another matter. My overall verdict? 9 out of 10 bloody deaths aplenty. All facts aside, I cannot say enough about how much this game enthralled me. Its story alone earned it instant bonus points, mixing both Cthulhu mythos and monster fears, as well as plague and outsider concerns in its mythos. That being said, let me break down its strong and weak points for you. First, its strong point. It is hard, but it is fair. Its combat is satisfying. The levels are beautiful. The monsters are amazing. Disturbing, but amazing. Its story is deep, varied, and complex. And the story and game mechanics are interconnected very well, such as the insight mechanic I mentioned earlier. Now, on the other hand, there are some negatives that this game has that I feel it needs to work on. Its load times are atrocious. Its dodge move is a bit short. Some of its game mechanics are cryptic. It has bad enemy placement in certain areas. The riposte technique is inconsistent. Its lack of an in-game map is a silly, stupid mechanic. And the lack of a pause is unforgivable to me. After 3 games, a pause, especially in solo play, should not only be present, should be freaking required. It should be practically a legal matter at this point. Just my opinion, but I've always felt the lack of a pause crippled the game in terms of attracting a wider audience, because not everybody can devote non-stop time to a game. There are times when we'll have to pause. And having to use an item to retreat to a safe zone is absurd. That being said, I still say, and I do believe that anybody who has even a passing interest should play it. It is hard. It is difficult. It is brutal. And it is more triumphant than any game I've played in a long time. That being said, it's not without its fault. And I do feel that it could do with some significant modification to improve its overall play mechanics. That all being aside, I still feel this is one of the best games I've played in the last 2 years. I also feel that's one of the games that really got me back into hardcore gaming. I had sort of lost interest in the hardcore gaming aesthetic for a while. I was playing games more for story rather than challenge or difficulty. And I had tried Demon, Dark Souls, and Dark Souls 2, and while I liked their ideas, I thought their combat mechanics broke them and made them almost pointless to play. I'm still trying to get through Dark Souls, by the way. I just find the game too difficult for its own good. But that's neither here nor there. At the end of the day, this is a game I feel people should play. And I feel that the theme song, or the trailer song, which is called Cut You Down by the Hit House, featuring Ruby Fieldman, should be on everybody's must-listen-to list. Now, that being said, I don't think it's going to appeal to everyone. There's certainly some people who will find the difficulty just intolerable. I understand that. And if it's not for you, then it's not for you. But for people who'd like a real game, who want a mature game, who want a game that really treats you like an add-on, this is the game. It's time to sharpen your swords, prepare your saws, and ready your shotguns. Bloodborne is awesome, and I recommend it to everybody. It's not without its faults, but let me tell you this. The game will start slow, fighting weaklings and trolls and some other monsters. But the first time you face down this ungodly monstrosity, yeah, then you know it's for real. And believe me, you will find your courage. After the first 5 or 6 deaths, of course. Thank you for watching. This is the Mega Mad Cat, and I will see you next time. Otherwise, I'm out. Keep an eye out for more stuff from Gundam Breaker in the future. See you later, folks.